That right there lit a fire. And that lit a fire, and that forced you to go all in and really work.
Well, and I'm sure too. What I heard too is like, my husband supported it, but I almost kind of had to prove to him that I can really make this happen.
Yeah, because he didn't think that and he would tell me it's not that I don't have faith in you, it's the market because he pays attention to all that stuff. But even to this day, I'll tell people, yes, we have the forecast. It's great to know what's going on, within our industry. But I don't like when people let it scare them. Like, I think it was last year where they were saying, the market, it's going to shift, it's going to go down. So what did I do? I doubled down on what I needed to do. Even my CPA, we met with him, and he says, all right, your income went down. He goes, but I did notice, like, what is this social media? Like, that went up. And I explained it to him, like, I was spending money so I could be seen.
Yeah,
he's like, well, that makes sense. He's like, yeah, the market shifted a little bit. You spent more money like you should be, so that we really didn't affect you much. But, it was nice for him to notice that and for me to explain it and for him to understand. Well, that's part of business, right?
Welcome back to Always Level Up the podcast. I'm your host, Carlos Garcia. We have your my co-host, Tracy Ross Garcia, and we have our wonderful guest today, Sandra Rangel. Welcome to the show, Sandra. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
So Sandra is a licensed agent broker?
Yes, I have my
broker now. Okay, awesome. And how long have you been in real estate?
18 years.
18 years in real estate. So long career, and also a personal trainer. She has a background in personal training. Yeah. Just shared that with us. So for those that don't know you, Sandra, go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
So real estate, 18 years. I was in corporate for like 20 years before I decided to, venture into real estate. People ask, why real estate? I'm like, honestly, thinking back, I'm not sure. But I just know that at the time, I was in a position where, upper management kind of put me in a spot where I was like, you know what? I always say, if you're not happy where you're at, move, right? So I was like, you know what? I don't think this is the place for me to continue to stay, right? But now I see it as a blessing in disguise, and now I'm like, I'm thankful that I was put in that situation, that I could make the decision I did, because I love it.
Right.
But it was like, all right, I think it's time to do something else, and I registered for the classes every weekend. It was like 5 weekends in a row. And then there was a class that it was, 2 weeks in the evening. So I did everything I needed to do to get it done quick. Yeah. And so I even did the prep exam practice, and I'm glad that I only, took it once and passed.
Did you?
Yes, because I think it's because I heard so many stories that people have taken it 4 or 5 times, and I'm thinking...
I'm definitely guilty. I took it 3.
So. Yeah, so I think that just freaked me out, and to where I'm like, oh my God, I really have to study hard because this is not going to be easy. And I'm glad, it paid off, because I was like, I don't want to have to do it again.
Are you a good test taker?
No, I get nervous. Okay. I get nervous, and then I, second guess it, and I start, so I'll be one to go back, look at my answers. Is there anything that
don't change your answers.
Yeah, don't change it. But did I leave anything blank, or did I, now you think about it and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that one was right,
Right.
But yeah, I'm not a good test taker.
And I'm, there's a state and national part, and the national part's like 80 questions. The state part's like 50 or something like that. And you have to do them back to back. So for me, I get real anxious, real ADD, and I have to move around. Like, man, I just can't sit there through the whole thing. So, I failed it twice. Failed both of them by 1 point my first time. Second time, I passed the state, and then failed the national. And then the third time, I passed the national. So
that's good.
It took a little bit of work. But, and then I studied before.
You're moving in the right direction.
I was like, progress.
Yeah, and then when I took my brokers, it wasn't bad, And I think it's because at that point you have to wait so many years and experience before you're allowed to do your broker's license. And the reason I did the broker's license wasn't because I wanted to be a broker, but I had a client that he was looking to do commercial, and I connected him with a commercial person. And he asked me, he was older, very respectful gentleman, and he's like, Sandra, what is that alphabet soup behind his name? So I was like, you know what? That's how the public sees all the ABR, CRS, and all these initials. They don't know what that means.
Right.
And it's just like, it kind of looks a little cluttered sometimes when you see that. But what stands out the most? Broker.
Yeah.
Or even when I was being interviewed and people were asking me, are you a broker or are you a realtor? And at that point, I would say, well, you don't want my broker because my broker's running the office.
Yeah.
You want you want to work with me, the realtor, because I have time to pay attention to you, right?
Right.
Now I'm like, all right, I'm the broker associate. Yeah, I have, more experience. You want to work with me, not just a realtor. So you kind of turn it to
Play the
whatever
game.
benefits you. And even new agents, I was telling new agents, don't tell them you're new, Just, go in, show, your confidence and all that. They're not going to ask you. It's us being afraid that, oh my God, are they going to be able to see through that I've only had one transaction or I have no transactions?
Yeah.
Like,
That's
no,
excellent
you're
advice
good.
there. That imposter syndrome just shows up,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
But,
Especially when you're new.
Yeah, I think that you have to, you have to have a certain level of confidence in yourself. And then, if you don't and no experience, it's almost like, I remember when I was in the beginning, first license and like, how long have you been doing this? Well, I don't know, not that long, but but I'll tell you what, I get you a good deal.
yeah. Or just turn I'm always really big about turning a negative into a positive
Right.
or always seeing the bright side of things, because it could be worse. And so I just feel the same thing with when you're in a situation like that for somebody that's new, it's make them feel like, hey, I'm hungry for it. I don't have any other distractions. I'm going to do everything to help you sell your home
Right.
because you're my only client.
Right.
So make them feel confident that you're going to do everything you can
Right.
because your full attention is
With them. You're
So-
the right person for it.
So
for that one house.
I want to go back to, you mentioned you were in corporate for how many years?
I think it's like 19 years.
Like 19 years. That's a long time.
It is.
Right. And, during this time, were your mother already at that time?
No.
Not yet?
No, not
Okay.
yet.
So when you made your decision to go from corporate to into real estate, like why? Like you've been asked the question, like what was it about real estate that made you
What
say,
drew
like,
you to real estate?
this is the path I want to go down?
I think, I try to think back and figure out like what exactly was it. I think I was, a workaholic. I always treated every company I worked for, I worked for USAA, then I transitioned over to the Toyota plant. And I always felt that work for the company as if it's for, your company.
Right.
Because if the company succeeds, then you continue to be employed. And so I've always felt that way, no matter who I'm working for, that I'm going to give it 100%. I'm not just going to go in and be like, you know what, 8 to 5, I'm done, I'm out. It's like, I'm going to do everything I can. If I'm done, I'm going to see who else needs help, so we can
Right.
all get out on time. I think, my father was in construction. He did a lot of the custom builder finish outs, things like that. So I think that was already kind of in my mind, in my blood, I guess. There's many times that I wanted to go, but obviously he couldn't take me.
To the job site.
Yeah, to the
construction
job
sites,
site,
yeah.
because I wanted to see that, and I thought it was cool, carpentry and seeing, the way they would cut the crown moldings, the cabinets, things like that. It was like, I thought it was interesting. And so I was like, man, imagine if he would have taken me, an extra skill I would have had for my business today. And I was like, darn it. But
Fun fact, that is the only part of real estate that I really am drawn to is that creative, the building,
the
construction,
design, all that.
part. Yeah.
And
Love
I
it.
don't feel like I have that design, per se, touch like you do. I'm like, "Ugh, can you go design my house?
Help me out here.
Yes, but, I do know, what quality is. And when I see it, and it's like, yes, these are things that we need to address. And, that's where I have my stager and be like, you know what, my stager will take care of all this. And,
Right.
my clients love it. So I have the resources. And so I know what I'm looking at, what I need for my listings to make them stand out. But I think it was because of that, because, yes, I did buy a house before I got my license. He was okay. And I can't say most people, I'm like, well, I saw what my realtor did and they were terrible and they didn't do a great job. I don't feel like my realtor did a terrible job. For what I knew, it was a good experience.
Right.
So I don't think that he motivated me to think, you know what, I
could
want
do
to get
that,
my
yeah.
license. I could
Right.
do that.
Right.
because I don't know what was behind the scenes, so I don't know everything that it entailed.
And that's interesting because, a lot of people, they get into real estate and a typical, answer is like, oh, I think you can make a lot of money in real estate, or you get a lot of freedom in real estate,
Yeah,
Oh my
that's
God.
always the big joke,
Where's
right?
that freedom?
The freedom, right?
my
you can create your own schedules. It's like,
We can?
but you mentioned it just a moment ago. It's like, you when you're working in corporate, you're like, hey, I got to work really, really hard and do more, so that way I can create more value. And if I do a good job, then the company does well, and I'm employed. And I think, it's a principle of success. That's going the extra mile. And if you're constantly going in the extra mile, you're creating that habit. Now, shifting over to real estate, it's even more important to have that kind of mindset because, you are working for yourself essentially. Yeah, you have a broker and they're sponsoring you, but you're gonna eat what you kill, right? You're gonna
Right.
earn what you make and the business that you make, and if you're not willing to go the extra mile, because literally you're not getting paid for anything until you get a transaction, like
It's
you're
all
working
you.
for free.
It's not your broker, it's you.
Exactly, and I think that's right there where a lot of people can get confused on having the right motivation to get into the space, but I think you have that coming into it.
Yeah, it's especially coming in and people are like, well, what is my broker going to do for me? And I'm like, don't go in with that mentality. Go in on like, there's a gentleman that we interviewed this week, and he says, I don't want leads. I want you to teach me how to get my own leads.
Right.
Because I like that. Even if people join my team, I said, look, I don't expect you to stay with me forever, but while we're working together, let's work together,
Right.
like really give it 100% to each other, how we can help each other. And then the day comes and you're ready to, fly. I'm ready to help you, move to that next step,
Right.
I've moved brokerages, but, not many. But even at that, it's like, what's going to benefit me and my team and my family when I make my moves?
Right.
And it's nothing personal. I still talk to my previous brokers. And
Right.
it's more like, hey, it's time for me to, make some changes.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, even for teams.
Right on. And with that mentality, I think going, not only do you go the extra mile, but you've become probably one of the best agents in San Antonio. And
Thank you.
well, really, and transaction wise, you're super busy. You're constantly productive. I mean, your amount of output and effort has yielded some great results, and I've seen a lot of your accolades that you've gotten and stuff like that. So what does it take to actually get to that level? And what kind of mindset do you have to have?
I think it's more the mindset of discipline and always pushing yourself. Everyone's always trying to say like, oh, I want to beat that person's numbers, And I know that a lot of people use me as, that point and be like, oh, I'm going to beat your numbers.
Benchmark.
Or I'm gonna, yeah, the benchmark, exactly. But I don't like to, I don't think I've ever had like a benchmark of one person that I wanted
Right.
to surpass or be like. I feel when I see success, it motivates me to see I could be there too. I can do that
Right.
as well. But obviously, I see that they're always working. They're always out and about. They're always pushing themselves. And it's like, that's what it takes. And the same with me. You asked, if, had kids, when I switched over. I didn't. So I feel that coming into real estate, my husband was working evenings. Before I left corporate, I had already started doing real estate, right before I transitioned over. And I was working evenings and weekends. It didn't affect my home life because my husband was working evenings with his shift. And then on the weekends, he was at the gym in the morning. I was showing houses. And then I would stop at a certain time that I knew he would be done. And then now it's family time. So I found that, medium that would work. And so even when he would get off like at 10 o'clock, I was still on my laptop at 8 and 9 o'clock. Or even he'd get home, unwind, we're watching television together. I still had my laptop on me. But that was my prospect time because I was out in the field, doing what I needed to do after hours. And then in the evenings, that's why I wasn't a cold call person because when I had the time to actually get in front of my computer, it was easy for me to find the strategies to say, oh, you came in through a lead online? How can I connect with you to make that connection. So you were looking at a certain area, and I knew there was builders that were building and offering certain incentives. I would use that hook to say, hey, I noticed you were looking in this area. Did you know that there are some builders that are offering you some incentives? There was an area off of, Shane Field and 1560, when it first started, Silver Oaks.
Okay.
They had USDA. I loved it when I had somebody that was looking in that area because it was easy for me to say, I can get you in 100% financing, which is unheard of unless you're a VA. And, so I found those little hooks. And then they were the ones that would reach out and like, I want to know more. So then I would call them the next day when it was an appropriate time.
Nice.
So I found ways where how can I connect with these people without me calling them at 8, 9 o'clock at night when I was, not servicing clients, showing them houses. So then I think it's just finding what it's going to work for you, to make that work. And I think the fact that I didn't have my son yet, then I was able to balance it between just my husband and then work and then the full-time job. So then at the time when Toyota cut back on hours and overtime, they offered severance packages. And even though I wasn't one that came in with, hey, you're going to make up for the decrease of pay because of the time and a half you're putting in. I started from the bottom up. It was still open to me. So they were like 6 months severance package if I wanted to take it or not. My husband's like, no, the market, and that's when the market was starting to shift, right? But I was confident, like, I know we'll be okay. It's just you and I, right? We're good, right?
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, like, if everybody, half of the people are leaving and taking this package, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to have more workload, and I'm like, no. And then by the time the deadline was coming that we had to give an answer, I told him, and I was like, I know you don't think, it's a good decision, but I think it is good. He's like, all right. And so I did, and that's what I'm saying. It's the best thing. Everything worked out perfectly because who has the ability to have a severance package and then go run with what they're already doing well? I knew it was getting to the point that I had to make a decision. Real estate is doing well for me. I have to give 100% one direction, right? And so there was my calling.
Yeah.
God said, here's your severance package. Go.
Here's your little cushion. Take the risk.
But I didn't have to touch it. That's the bright side, is that I had it there. So I don't know if that was a sense of confidence that I had it there. I wasn't worried about, oh my God, I'm using my last dollar and I need to make sure. I looked at it as like, I don't have it. I need to go and perform. And so then it was easy for me to then push myself. Not feel like, oh, you know what, now I'm going to relax. In the beginning, my husband's like, hey, can you take my laundry to the cleaners? Can you do this? And then as time progressed, I didn't have time to do that. Like now, no more honeydews. I'm like, I have to go work. I got things to do. So it was neat to see that transition to where I'm like, yeah, I'll take that. I'll do this. And I was able to do things. But then as my day started filling, it's like, no, you on your way to work, you can
How long was that time period before you really, fully transitioned after you left your corporate job?
I want to say it was maybe about 3 to 6 months because one of my coworkers' wife was looking for a part-time job, and I felt like, well, I don't need an assistant yet, right? But I was like, oh, okay, 10 hours a week, she can start helping me. And so then I was thinking, do I have enough to fill her, her plate?
Super busy.
And it worked out that as I brought her on, then I was able to give things that I didn't have to do, like how they tell you nowadays, like where is, your value more, placed in is being out there, in the field. And so that's when I was at Remax, and I was rarely in the office. People would be like, oh, Sandra's never in the office. Well, yeah, Sandra's out in the field where she should be,
making appointments.
Trying to look for that business, right? So when I find myself in the office more than I want to, and I'm like, I need to get myself out there. This is not good that I'm in the office, right? So to me, I don't see that as a positive thing, in my eyes for myself, So I just think it's like my expectations. And even my team will say, like, Sandra, you're so hard on yourself. Like, you do so well, and you have expectations, and you're trying always pushing yourself. And it's like, it's not that I do give myself credit. I know I'm doing well, but I feel like, I'm in control of what I bring in. Corporate, you're limited.
Right.
So I'm like, I can basically write my own paycheck depending on what I put out, right? So, like I was talking to your wife, it's like I'm starting for this year more videos than I was doing last year. If last year I don't feel like I was doing much, but others are like, well, yeah, I see you a lot. You're always coming to my feed. I'm like, well, they thought that was a lot. I'm like, now I'm really focused. This is really
Just wait.
what I need to do. You're going to be tired of me. You're going to block me, right? But I know what I need to do. And those shifts and changes that we need to make to our business to people to see us out there.
Yep. And I love that you said that, because when you have a level of comfort and you lean on that comfort, it's easy to get sucked in and then become a little bit lazy. And I think there's probably a fear of that laziness settling in for you. You're probably like, I don't want that because I know what can come from it. It's more like I need to work. Like you said, like I acted like I didn't have that severance package.
Yeah.
That right there lit a fire. And that lit a fire, and that forced you to go all in and really work.
Well, and I'm sure too. What I heard too is like, my husband supported it, but I almost kind of had to prove to him that I can really make this happen.
Yeah, because he didn't think that and he would tell me, it's not that I don't have faith in you, it's the market, because he pays attention to all that stuff. But even to this day, I'll tell people, yes, we have the forecast. It's great to know what's going on, within our industry. But I don't like when people let it scare them. Like, I think it was last year where they were saying, the market, it's going to shift, it's going to go down. So what did I do? I doubled down on what I needed to do. Even my CPA, we met with him, and he says, all right, your income went down. He goes, but I didn't notice, like, what is this social media? Like, that went up. And I explained it to him, like, I was spending money so I could be seen.
Yeah,
he's like, well, that makes sense. He's like, yeah, the market shifted a little bit. You spent more money like you should be, so that we really didn't affect you much. But, it was nice for him to notice that and for me to explain it and for him to understand. Well, that's part of business, right?
Yep.
So
the lulls, right? You've had to have a strategy to fill in those areas. So when it does come up, you're already top of mind, right?
Yes.
You're not then backtracking and saying, oh, the market's good. Let me put myself out there. I'm already out there.
Yeah. And that's the mentality. Like I told you, I take a negative, turn to positive, and I'm like, I refuse to say that it's going to affect me. And if that is to come, what am I going to do so it doesn't affect me as much? And so that's where I was like, I invested in videos, my social media. Every day was a video, right? Now, not really with me in it. Now I'm like, you know what? I need more videos with me in it, So just making those changes. And I think that's really important because, people will notice it.
You have a very positive mindset and a positive outlook on things, and also you have a strong faith in what you can do. And where did that come from? Where'd you learn that?
My parents were migrant workers, so it was just my stepfather raised me, since I was 3 years old. So it's like he was my father figure, and that culture was like woman's place is in the house, right? Your mom needs you to help clean, cook. I was the oldest, I have 2 brothers and a sister. So it was always in my mind, even though I'd be like, like I want to go to my friend's house. Like, why can't I be a kid, right? But I always talk to myself saying, you know what? When I'm older, I get married, I know I'm going to, I know how I'm going to keep a household, clean, cook, and all of that. And I'm grateful because of, I think that work ethic that he gave me got me where I am today, and I really think that, that generation, it's like almost like the basics, learning, it's the basics with real estate, but it's the basics of knowing that in order to succeed, you have to work hard, no matter what it is. It's either your home life, and, how do you transition over from, working hard as a family to then transition it over to your business. And so I feel that's why I've always been workaholic, and you're saying you can't sit still. I kind of feel like I'm like that.
Right.
I always have to be doing something, or checking my email, even though I don't need to. I have
10 o'clock
to.
at night before I go to bed. Did something come through?
Yes, that is me.
I do it
and
too.
I don't.
And she has her assistants like
right.
making sure that she's checking up on those things, and you're like, wait, I'm just
Yes,
Just in case.
but it's one of those things that if you enjoy what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work, right? And then you're always looking at what else can I do, So I'm always down. I cannot just sit down and watch TV. Or like people will say, "Oh, what is those shows that are coming out?" And I'm like, "Oh no,
have no idea.
Netflix." And I'm like, "No." Unless it's me, my husband, weekends, Saturdays, Friday, Saturday nights.
You have to
We
schedule
will.
it.
Oh, yeah, I know, right, honey. Yeah, I can't.
You got an hour.
But no, we do have family time.
Right.
I do shut it off. But if he's watching the game, I don't want to watch the game.
Right.
Okay, I'll sit there, but I'm gonna have my laptop with me, right?
I got some productive things I can do.
Yeah. At the same time, we're still in the same room. We're still quality time, right?
that counts.
That counts, right? But it could be things like that, and I'm like, well, I don't want to watch football. I'm like, okay, he's watching it. I'm the table, with my laptop doing whatever. Or even if we're watching something and then there's something critical that comes up, I excuse myself. I go to my office really quick, take care of it. He pauses the show, and then I come back. But if it's something that can wait, phone rings and I see it's somebody that, like, really, you're calling me at 7 o'clock? Like, you can wait till tomorrow. And I'm not, But
you learn how to prioritize those calls.
exactly.
Right?
But I know that, okay, we're negotiating some repairs or something, and I've been waiting for this call. I'm like, hold on. I've been waiting for this call, and I finally got it. Okay. So it's just things
Got
like
to take
that.
care of business.
Yeah.
Yeah, when duty calls. I love that. Well, for me, I can relate because I don't, for one, there was a time where I would enjoy TV shows and stuff like that. And I would ask like this thought would just come across my mind. It's like, if you want to be really successful, like, should you be watching TV? Like, what do you really want to do? And even Tracy at one point was like, hey, would call me Mr. Leisure because I just like to chill.
He's like, I think I'm gonna go to the gym and play basketball. Or I'm like, okay.
This was definitely in my 20s, just so you know.
Okay, not now, because I was like, really?
Definitely in my 20s, and but that would stick with me. It's like, man, like, hold on, I can't. There's no way I'm gonna be super successful or as successful as I want to be if I'm just like not using my time efficiently. So I just got into like reading books and like personal growth books and stuff like that. And one thing I learned is when somebody can budget their time and really use it to have activities that help them accomplish their goals and really fulfilling their purpose, then that's really how you start to make progress consistently, and then it becomes a habit. So once I changed that mindset and work became something that I enjoyed because I saw progress, one thing I with my own addictive behavior is like, I get addicted to the good stuff, like, progress, achievement, like those things feel good. I want more, I want more, I want more. So then it kind of, it relates to where, you're feeling these things like, what else is next? What's the next thing for me to tackle? What's the next mountain
Feed
for me
me
to
more.
climb? Yeah,
Feed me more. What's
I need some more.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's that engine that just stays on and doesn't turn off. But at some point, you have to take a little step back and just, let me take a breather.
And you need to. And, like me, I wish I was one that reads books.
Mm-hmm.
I don't read books. For one, it's like, when? When am I going to make that time? And I feel like when I'm reading a book, my mind's constantly
Thinking about other things.
Yes.
The
So
book
it's
says
like, then I got to
something.
read it again, right? Like
Like,
all
I'm
right,
still
wait.
on page 3.
But I love audibles because what I'll do, and if I'm doing cardio in the morning, I'm listening to my audibles. And it's okay to listen to audibles because then my mind's going as they're talking, and it's making me think of like, okay, I can pause it and then be like, okay, write my notes, or voice to notes or whatever to say like, oh, that's a great idea. Or it makes me think of something that I could be doing. There was times that, I would be driving if I have to go to the country, 30, 45-minute drive, and I'm listening to it. And then there was once where Annalisa called me, right? And I was already listening to something and I had these ideas. And then I'm telling her about it and the plans and this and that. She keeps telling me, keep talking. I'm writing notes. And I'm like, well, you better share those notes because I'm driving and I can't write notes. But it was like, oh my God, that's a great idea.
You're like, this is going to be good. Write this down.
Yes. I didn't even have to tell her. She's already writing it down and she's laughing. She's like, I love it when you're listening to your audibles because then you have these things that like we can, execute. And what I love about Annalisa is that she'll execute. Like I might tell her like, hey, I want to do this and that. And she's already making the appointment, so she's doing it. And I'm like, oh my God, girl, like I need to learn that from you. Because she executes.
She does it now. No procrastination.
Exactly. With her, no procrastination, not whatsoever. But, and that's why we still collaborate. Every week we have a weekly meeting, her and I, because we're like, okay, what are we going to do this week? And what else can we do? Like we just went to a model home. We did some B-roll, just her and I. We didn't need a videographer. We're like, we can do this. And we did. And so now let's go use that. But it's just things like that. I love when I listen to the audibles, even when I'm driving from the house to the office, even if it's 15 minutes, I'm listening, and then when I'm leaving, I'm listening. But the best part is like when I pick up Cody from school, and I'm listening to that, he's listening,
right.
And he's 11, he'll be 12 next month.
You're feeding him some of the gold.
He is, because I can't remember which one it was, but it said something about kids. And then he's like, hey, wait a minute. And I'm like, he's listening. Yeah. It said something like to have them do something. And he's like, hey, wait a minute. And I was like,
turn this off. I don't agree with that message.
Yeah. But I like that, because in the mornings I either listen to Caleb, spiritual, and so I know that he's getting poured into as well. Right. But when I listen, if I know it's a good audible, like when I'm going to drop him off, I'll turn it on and I know he's listening.
And just... Well, I got to correct myself because my learning wasn't really through reading books. It was actually through Audible books. But for that very reason, right? It's like, when do I have time to read, sit down, and, actually read a book? It's, really challenging. And for the same thing as like I got to read things 4 or 5 times before it resonates. But there's something about that Audible book. You just put it on and all of a sudden it's just like, it just catches your attention. Yeah. Or even if it doesn't and, you get lost in thought, your subconscious mind is actually picking it up, whether you recognize it or not. And a lot of times people will make excuses. Well, I don't have time to read. I don't have time to learn. It's like, look, you have to prioritize. Yeah. You have to prioritize learning. And Audible is probably one of the best ways for, I guess, most people, because we're always in our car. We're always driving. We're always on the run. Yes, most people cannot sit down and just read a book, take an hour aside, unless you wake up really early, and, dedicate an hour to reading.
Or your kids are at an age where they don't bother you.
Right, exactly.
Like us as moms, we don't have a quiet time.
No.
What's that?
I know. What is that?
I mean, if I get up at 5 a.m, okay, then I get my workout, and then it's like, okay, then I have to get, showered, ready, then get him up. And, so as a mom, it's harder. And that's why I have a lot of people that will ask me, like, well, how do you do it? And it's like, you need to find what works with you and when it works. Me, I realized that in the after work, it didn't work because what am I doing? I'm getting home, then all of a sudden I have a call, and then I'm handling the call. And by the time I'm done with it, okay, what am I going to work out or am I going to make dinner? So I'm just like, what? I'm not paying attention to me. So if I have to get up at 5 a.m. when my husband's up at 5 to go to work, there's no excuse. So I have those 2 hours. So that's what I started doing.
Budgeting your time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I hate waking up and working out at 5 a.m. But if it doesn't happen at that time, it's not happening.
Not gonna happen.
Not
Exactly.
happening. I already know myself better. It's not going to happen after hours. That's for sure.
Yeah. But.
Yeah. Well, that was something that I kept nudging Tracy on, like, hey, maybe get up a little earlier.
I don't want to. Although I did have, the babies, you can't. Now they're at an age where, like, the older ones can watch the little ones while I go work out,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
so
no,
that helps.
For sure. So what are some of the accolades? What are some of the things that you've accomplished that you are, that you've really worked hard for, and like what did it take to get there?
Well, I think the one that resonates more is where I became number 1 NAREP. At the time, the president was like so excited because I had been in the top 10, and you're like, okay, great, cool, right? Awesome, right? It's great for marketing, but it's not something that drives me to say like, oh, I need to be number 1. I don't think I've ever felt like I want to be number 1 and I'm going to beat everybody's numbers. I'm not that competitive. I'm more competitive on myself on being better than I was prior. And so I'm not a public speaker. I'm getting a little bit more comfortable on podcasts, because, it depends if I'm with friends,
Right.
But even my first podcast, super nervous, even coming in, I was still a little bit nervous. But when she called me and told me that it looks like, the tallies are still going, but it looks like you're going to be number 1. And I was like, my heart sank. Like, oh my God, my heart started beating, and I was like, hyperventilating. I'm like, no, you know what that means? In my mind, what that means is I'm going to have to stand in a podium and give a speech. And that's all that was going in my mind versus being like, yes, I'm number one. I'm going to be number one. Which she was excited because I was the first woman to be number one. Because it always had been the guys,
Really?
Yeah, it had always been the men, that
incredible.
were the number ones and all that. And so she was excited for me, more than me, because just the plain simple fact that it's like a Latina, she's going to be the first one to be number one, right? And so I was all like, so that was exciting and that was nice. And so I did have like one, maybe two tequila shots before I actually went to the podium. But it was also too
gotta
because
loosen up these nerves.
yes, but the hard part is that, I don't always talk about my personal life or like when you grow up, right? So knowing that I was going to go up there and kind of pour a little me into them just kind of like made me even more nervous, And I think I got to the part where, my voice got shaky and then everybody started clapping and I was like, oh, I'm like, okay, thank you. I needed that break. And then I got myself back, collected and then I finished. But I think that was like the biggest one. And then after that, it's different, Each accolade hits different, but I think that was the one that really did it for me, being, Latina and then being the first woman in the San Antonio.
Right.
So that was really neat.
That is awesome.
That is awesome. Congratulations.
It's incredible.
When was that?
Of course, you would ask me. And you asked my assistant.
And I know.
It was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I want to say.
Awesome. I feel like I remember.
Yeah, no, I
and that was
saw
at the Frost Bank, the
new
top
building.
floor. No, not the new, the old one.
Oh,
but it
okay.
was on the top floor, and that's when they had them there. But it was different.
Well, I love that because, for me, it's like, even when you don't expect to do something, but just the amount of work that pours into it, and just constantly just trying to improve. I mean, it takes so much focus. It takes so much discipline. And nobody really knows what goes into it and what happens behind the scenes and all the ups and downs and all the challenges and the contracts you're negotiating, the ones that fall out, the ones that you get,
Yes.
You push all the way to the end, and sometimes it's just a whirlwind of stuff, and it's like, then how do you juggle all of that, and get there, but without even thinking about it, it's like it sounded like you weren't shooting for number one, but you were just trying to be better than what you were yesterday, and year over year it's just growth and growth and growth, and it just compounded to the point where, hey, it's your time.
I just think if you go in with a serving heart, wanting to help as many people as you can, people would be like, oh, what's your price point? I'm like, anybody that needs my help. Anyone that needs my help. Either it be a small lot. I was in Kerrville trying to find a lot that's probably going to be like 50,000, getting calls. And I'm like, okay, hold on. I need to figure out where exactly this lot is, because they need my help. A gentleman wants me to help him sell his mom's lot, and he's, communicating, for her. But it's just like, it's a small little lot. Somebody else would have been like, it's not worth my time.
Right.
And I'm like, all right.
I'm here to serve.
Yeah, I'm here to serve. And actually, it's a referral from an agent. So I'm going to have to pay a referral fee. So it's easy for me to say, like, if I'm going to make $500, it's not worth my time. I could, but I'm going to see how I can, help. But it's just different things like that.
No, I think that's awesome because even with our agents, when we're talking to them about, like, and a lot of them are new, it's like, do the actions. Like, you don't know what they're going to lead to, right? Where you're in a space, you're in a season where it is about the more, it's very front loaded, right? The more actions you take, the more hands you shake, the more no's you hear, the more, hang-ups you get, whatever it is, the more phone calls you make, like, do those things and they will end up leading to something, right? You're not going to know what the right thing is if you're just too afraid to make any choices and take the step to do something.
But if you think about it, what if I'm helping this one gentleman? Little do I know that he has deep pockets, and then later he's going to move to San Antonio or refer me somebody, higher dollar. So you never know, your actions, how they'll affect you in the future, and then you're going to be like, oh my God, I almost said no to that.
Right.
And, look what it came, of that one transaction.
100%.
And there's times that, obviously we're not in the business of not making money, but I found myself in a situation where she was going to a divorce, future ex-husband was not helping, and he would rather see her foreclosed than do anything. And so I basically did that transaction for free. But it was like, it was either my commission and she forecloses, but not really commission because she'd foreclose, there'd be no commission. Or I'd say, you know what, forfeit my commission. The difference in the payoff of the loan gets taken care of. She doesn't get foreclosed. She moves on. She's referred me her friend, like 2 or 3, transactions after that. And it's just like, because I did what felt right to me, And so you have to find yourself in a position where you're willing to do something like that to help someone else out of a bad situation.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, like you said, like you never know how God's gonna bless you.
Correct.
And a lot of times it's easy to get caught up in the dollars and how much money we're gonna make. Everybody wants to make money. Everybody has needs, has wants. But there's a time where you have to realize, like, hey, a blessing's gonna come in one way or another, or you might be a blessing to somebody else.
Yes.
And whatever it is, if we're here with that servant mentality, then we're gonna attract more business. Sometimes, you do a little bit of work, and maybe there's not a compensation dollar-wise, but there is something beyond that. Whether it turns into referrals, it's something spiritual. Whatever it may be, like that right there has value.
Yeah.
And I think too many people place value on currency as opposed to the relationships and the good things that come out of these interactions with people and helping people out of tough situations. So it's always important to keep that front of mind because when you don't, then you get lost in the sauce, right?
Yes.
And then you start chasing the wrong things, and it's definitely it's a good reminder. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that is good. Not to go off topic, it is related, but I was listening to the radio, the Caleb this morning, and they were sharing a story where, I think it was like a man had like heard a message, like he felt like God was placing it on his heart to go tell his boss, who was not a believer, to like invite him to church, right? And he was like, and then so he's like, so I kind of hesitated a little bit because I knew that this guy didn't believe, so I was like, but I went in there anyways, and I, gave him a little spiel, and I just walked in the room, I wasn't paying attention. Needless to say, the boss said, no, that's not his thing, whatever. Months later, he crosses paths with a gentleman who was actually in the room. I think he was either like laying tile or doing something, fixing something in the room that was really struggling and heard the message and went to church and saved his life. Like, just so amazing, right? And it wasn't that direct conversation that he had with who he thought he was supposed to save. It was somebody who he had no idea was a stranger that heard the story,
Yeah, I heard that. I was listening at the same time. It was good. I was like, man, that is really good.
That's so awesome.
You don't know who's listening to the conversations that it might impact their life, versus the one that it was intended for.
Right on. So, you've had these accolades. You've done great in real estate. You've made a lot of you've had a lot of success. Now, what's the next mountain that you're shooting for? That you're climbing right now.
I want to learn commercial. So I was telling your wife, like, having, obviously you're a brokerage and growing your brokerage. Me, I've had teams, small teams, 2, 3, and then 1 or 2, so it changes around, right? And so to this year, I was thinking, like, you know what, maybe no more team, right? Just go at it alone, just Sandra Rangel. And, well, there's a gentleman that, joined my brokerage, and he wants to start a team. And I'm like, all right, well, you want to start a team? You're going to help me, right? And so he's on board with that. So we're looking to start a team. I'm excited because I have basically somebody as motivated as me, like a partner, because sometimes when you're doing a team, it's hard. It's hard to be the motivator, the producer, putting the hammer down to hold them accountable. Like, I don't have that support. Like, I don't have a huge team with, ISA and, all this staff support. Yes, I do have transactional support and marketing support, but it's like to be that person, like, motivating them and also closing deals because you got to pay the overhead, you got to pay the salaries, and it's tough. And so this year I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I don't do a team. And so maybe that's, I don't know, God's sign to say, like, nope, I still need you to be a team, right? So he brought Rudy into my life. You're like, nope, you still have a lot to pour into people. So I think with Rudy, it's going to help me with that balance because he's more of he likes to mentor, coach people. I feel like I'm more a mentor, help people through struggles and, situations and motivate, but Rudy's more like, the coaching type of material. And I was like, okay, I think that could work. And he also does commercial. So I'm like, great, I don't have to leave my brokerage to go join a commercial brokerage because that's usually what they typically want you to do because you have to kind of do it 100%. Same thing with wholesaling. I can't just try to juggle so many things. And so I'm excited that now if I have a light day or whatever, I told him, I said, I'll be your Uber driver. I want to listen to what you're, talking and all that. And so now I'm excited because now I can start doing more in commercial or at least assisting him I'm okay to be his assistant. Like I'll do the paperwork because now I'll start seeing the transaction. So I feel like he's going to pour into me as I pour into him. So I'm excited about what 2025 has to bring.
That's awesome. And one thing that stands out that you're saying right there is that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to learn, right? I'll manage your paperwork. I'll look over the docs.
Yeah. I'll drive you around town.
I'll drive you around. Like man,
all
look,
the things that some might think that they're above that.
Yeah,
right?
like we're talking to the best realtor in town, and over here, like, hey, willing to be humble and come with this open heart to learn and open mind to learn and really just and to serve at the same time to do whatever it takes to climb up that next level
well,
of
you
success.
don't know, like you said, your perfect story. Who is watching and who is listening. So there was a group of agents, somewhere on my team. They were going to go out at a model home and they were going to do content. I was like, I want to go too. Why didn't think I would want to go? Or I was too busy to go. And I was like, I'll go too. And then she comes back and tells me afterward, oh, yeah, I told so-and-so that you were coming. And they're like, Sandra's coming? Like, Sandra doesn't need this? Like, so you don't know who might be looking up to you that it's like, wow, like I'm not too good to go and hang out with them. So you just never know how that's going to inspire them to be like, man, I want to be like that. Like, even though I know that stuff or I don't need to be here, I'm going to be here, kind of support, my peers. But, I always look at it, I might learn something. Every situation, even when you go to conferences, you might not feel like, well, I don't need it anymore. I already know what they're going to say. Yeah. But somebody might speak, to you to where you're like, you know what? That just what he said, that piece from the whole thing resonated, and I'm going to act on that.
Yeah. That was the message.
That was my message to me. So I always feel that it's like, and that's why, podcast or motivational, whatever you can find or, just plug into something. Always get that mind thinking.
Right. And I think it's important to constantly be hungry to learn more. Yeah. Right. As we get older and we hit certain levels of success, it's like doesn't mean life's over. It means like, hey, there's something else for you to go and advance to, right? And it's just a whole journey. So when you're shooting for that next level, you're pretty much starting over at a new level, and it's like, okay, now I have so much more to learn. Yeah. And now you just have to,
it feels like a fresh start, right?
It's like new challenges.
Yeah. It's a new challenge.
It's challenges that you always have to challenge yourself. If not, you're going to be bored.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And if you don't ever pursue that, well, then what happens there, right? Then there's a regression. You go backwards. You get comfortable. Maybe life's not as fulfilling, but as you're constantly striving and learning, it allows you to, one, learn and grow, but two, you're able to be an inspiration to people. That's one of the things that you mentioned without even knowing it. That people are like, they pay attention to you, and they're like, hey, you're influencing them in one way or another by your actions, and I think that's just the beauty of being in this space is that. There's a lot of people that have been in the space for a long time, and they're always willing to share and teach and learn from other people as well, right? No matter what it is. So with that, I think as we continue to move and level up in life, I think there's definitely going to be some more lessons coming up. I want to, as we're getting close to the end right here, I want to wrap up with this. What would be your best advice to anybody that's maybe the younger version of Sandra, maybe anybody else that's listening that's maybe on your team or what would be your best advice to them to advance themselves and level up in in their career, their life?
Well, it's kind of like you said. It's like, don't think you're too good for something. It's like, put yourself out there. When I started in the business, I didn't have a database or anything like that. So what was I doing? I was doing open houses. They weren't my listings, but I was putting myself out there, and I was meeting people that would walk in. Maybe they didn't buy the house that I was having an open house with, but, getting comfortable with how to convert, and knowing what to say, so that way when you're in that situation, you already have the questions, what to ask. If you walked into my open house, what I'd be like, okay, tell you about the house, but you're not looking for this particular house. I'm going to be like, well, what are you looking for? And how many bedrooms, how soon, like already be comfortable with, basically your skill, on how you're going to approach each situation. Because I feel like, if you don't have the confidence, it's gonna show. And so I think it's like kind of you say, fake it till you make it, but it's just more, even though you're as nervous as you can be, but it's just like, show the confidence or that you care, let that show. You're your best asset, and continue to do things that will put you out there, Don't feel like you're too good for the open houses. I mean, I keep thinking this year, I'm like, man, I need to hit open houses this year, because I need to build up that database, because most of mine were buyers and then now sellers. And it's like my database is decreasing because my sellers move out of state, which I still keep in touch with because they have friends here. But it's like I need to keep filling up that pipeline, to replace what's leaving.
Right on. And
Do what works.
do it worse and go back to the basics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really what it is, Me, it's sticking to the basics and then adding new stuff. I got to keep up with the Joneses, right? I got to keep up with the younger generation, right? So I'm like...
You're like, TikTok, what?
I know.
What is this? You're banning it.
Exactly. So I'm like, woo, now I don't have to do TikTok, right?
But Instagram, come on, here we are.
Oh, yeah. So I love my Instagram, so I try to keep up with that. So I'm glad that one's not leaving because I poured a lot into that one. But TikTok, I'm like, I hadn't really done it. But, just things like that. It's more just keep pushing and doing things that others don't want to do.
Love that. So what for anybody that wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to find you?
They could find me on Instagram, Sandra Rangel 2018, or, Facebook, Sandra Rangel.
So if anybody has a house that they want to sell or they want to buy a house, hit up Sandra.
Yep.
Or if you
your
need
girl.
a mentor, she'll help you out a little bit.
Yeah.
Just
Some
mess-
advice. I'm here.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you joining us, Sandra. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Hope y'all got some gems, some nuggets out of this, and ready to take it to the next level. Catch you on the next one.